In this presentation, I will attempt to explain constructivism as a theory of learning, as well as its development from and relationship to several other learning theories. Learning theories, as they were developed and applied in the past, form a continuum. At the beginning of this continuum is the behaviorist learning theory developed by John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner. This is followed by Alfred Bandura's theory of social cognitive learning, then David Ausubel's assimilation theory, and finally constructivism as a learning theory developed from the works of Jean Piaget, Lev Vygotsky, and Jerome Bruner. This continuum is based on the location of knowledge relative to the learner. The behaviorists see knowledge on one end of the continuum as something that is external to the learner and must be absorbed by the learner through a process of stimulus and response. On the other end of the scale are constructivists, who believe knowledge is something internal to the learner and must be constructed in the learner's own mind, based on the experiences a learner has in the environment. Constructivism as a learning theory is derived from 5 sources. These include Piaget's ideas of personal, cognitive, or also known as trivial constructivism, von Glaserfeld's ideas on radical constructivism, Vygotsky's and Bruner's study of social constructivism, as well as more recent constructivist ideas called critical constructivism, described by Joe Kincheloe, and cultural constructivism. In the next slides, I hope to focus on the first 3 types of constructivism that deal directly with teaching and learning in the classroom. Jean Piaget's ideas of personal or cognitive constructivism were based on specific developmental stages in a learner as it related to their age. The first, sensory motor stage, included children from newborn up to 2 years of age. In this age range, children experience their environment through their 5 senses, and thinking takes place through their actions. The pre-operational stage follows from ages 2 through 6. In this stage, children develop language communication, but this language is often egocentric and does not show logical thinking. The third stage occurs from age 7 to 12 years of age and is called the concrete operational stage. Children are able to reason logically, but can only do so in one dimension. The formal operational stage begins at age 12 or so and is shown by the child's ability to think logically and abstractly in multi-dimensions. This stage continues for the remainder of life. Piaget proposed that children grow through these stages by building an ever-increasing knowledge structure in their minds. This occurs through processes of assimilation of material that is in agreement with pre-existing knowledge structures or schema, accommodation of material that is not in agreement with pre-existing knowledge structures, and equilibration to alter knowledge structures, bringing equilibrium between the assimilated and accommodated material. Social constructivism, developed by Vygotsky, viewed internal knowledge construction as mainly a social event. Children interact with their environment mainly through hearing and speaking of language. Vygotsky believed that children at any age have an ability to display knowledge without help for a set of learned concepts. To encourage children to build on this knowledge, they must be guided by experts to knowledge that exist in a zone of proximal development. This zone is unique to each child and has an upper boundary that the child simply cannot achieve beyond, even with expert help. To maximize learning, the teacher must determine the upper bound of the zone and challenge each student with learning situations where they are pushed up against this upper bound. Jerome Bruner took Vygotsky's ideas a step further and showed that children are able to display their level of knowledge regarding a certain concept in 3 ways. Those who have a weak understanding of the concept are only able to display their knowledge using actions with actual objects. This is the inactive mode. Once a learner has a better grasp of a concept, this can be displayed through the use of images and diagrams, bringing out the iconic mode. Finally, when a learner has full knowledge of a concept, they can exhibit this using symbols such as letters and numbers. These levels can be shown repetitively for each new concept learned. This process is helped by presenting curriculum in a spiral fashion, using methods such as discovery learning, inquiry learning, and case method teaching. This brings us to the practical comparison of a traditional classroom and a constructivist classroom. The differences clearly show a shift in focus for both teacher and student. In the traditional classroom, curriculum begins with the parts of the whole, and it emphasizes basic skills. But in constructivism, big concepts are emphasized, beginning with the whole and then expanding to the parts. In the traditional classroom, strict adherence to fixed curriculum is highly valued. But in the constructivist classroom, pursuit of student questions and interests is valued. In the traditional classroom, materials are primarily textbooks and workbooks. But in constructivism, they include manipulative materials and primary sources of information. In the traditional classroom, learning is based on repetition. But constructivists feel that interactive learning, building on what the student already knows, is important. In the traditional classroom, teachers disseminate information to the students. Students then are recipients of knowledge. But in the constructivist classrooms, teachers dialogue with their students, helping the students construct their own knowledge. The teacher's role is directive in a traditional classroom, rooted in authority. But in a constructivist classroom, the role is interactive, rooted in negotiation. In the traditional classroom, assessment occurs through testing and correct answers. But in the constructivist classroom, it's much more. It includes student works, observations, points of view, as well as tests. Process is as important as product. In the traditional classroom, knowledge is seen as inert. But in the constructive classroom, knowledge is seen as dynamic, ever-changing with our experiences. In the traditional classroom, students typically work alone, but in a constructivist classroom, typically students work in groups. This brings to a close this presentation outlining the development and practical application of constructivist learning theory.